One of the places that was liberated was the town of Snihurivka, north of Kherson city, and there videos emerged and also reports from journalists who were there with the Ukrainian soldiers actually as they came into the town, of local people coming out into the streets, waving flags, of course in tears, throwing their arms around the Ukrainian soldiers as they arrive. Scenes of really, great emotion and huge relief, which is quite understandable when you visited parts of Ukraine that were already liberated earlier from under Russian occupation and heard the stories of people there, of the kinds of treatment that people who had an even vaguely pro-Ukrainian position, or not necessarily even that, were subjected to by the Russian occupiers. Awful stories of tortures and murders that emerged from Kharkiv region, where I was recently, and unfortunately there's a very, very high probability that similar stories will now be coming out of Kherson region. So I say that people are relieved. There are also not very many of them there, because these are areas that have seen very, very intense fighting. Most people fled, whether to Ukrainian-held territory or to Russia. There were also Russian evacuations that were organised and more or less forced. So, of course, there aren't very many people left, and there's a huge amount of destruction. I would imagine that the areas currently being liberated look even worse than the areas that it took a bit less time for the Ukrainian army to move into, where they moved into a few weeks ago, and which I visited recently. You see destruction all around, and in particular, cars strewn by the side of the road, clearly blown up by something, and you wonder whether anyone was in those cars, what happened exactly, whether they were civilians or soldiers, Russians or Ukrainians.